Hello, and welcome to the Finding the Unicorn in You podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jaime Raygoza, here to help you unlock your unique potential and thrive into your career. Get ready to explore inspiring stories and practical strategies that will empower you not only to prevent burnout, but also achieve sustainable success. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Finding the Unicorn in You. Today, we have a very special guest. She is a productivity consultant helping business owners make more profit in less time with better systems. Her goal is to help entrepreneurs reclaim their time, energy, and attention away from busyness and towards joy without sacrificing their profits. So without further ado, I'll let her introduce herself. We have JJ Jank.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here on the podcast. Yeah, and I actually started my business after the pandemic because my whole point about productivity is not to make people work harder or longer. It's about working smarter so that you then have more time for the really important things in life, which is spending time with loved ones and doing your favorite activities and things outside of work. So really getting through the tasks that you really need to accomplish in a reasonable amount of time so that you then can free up some time for everything else. And I felt like before the pandemic, nobody really cared. Everybody was kind of okay with, okay, well, I'm going to work 12 hours a day every single day. And, I'll see my kids, in time to put them to bed. That's fine. I've given up on the thing that I loved when I was a kid. I haven't done it because, I'm an adult now and I'm too busy. And then during the pandemic, people kind of rediscovered all these things like, oh, yeah, my kids make me crazy, but I actually do really like to spend more time with them. And oh yeah, I picked up that hobby I had when I was younger and I don't really want to give it up. And then it's kind of like, okay, well, but now that we're back, like how do I still do those things? And if I'm a business owner, how do I continue to be profitable? How do I continue to grow my business? And, the answer to that is productivity.
I love that. And a lot of people don't think of it as, oh, my systems that I put in place cause me to be more or less productive. They're just like, it's all external factors, or it must be me. I'm just intrinsically like faulty. So, like, what allowed you to think of the macro sense of it's the small little things that I do every day versus external factors?
Right. Right. I mean, and to be fair, like some of it sometimes is external factors. If you're working on a spreadsheet, for example, when I actually started, I had my CRM on a spreadsheet. And once I moved to a CRM, all of a sudden all of those kinds of tasks got a lot faster. Plus in CRMs, you can, run reports and things. So there are kind of minor tweaks you can make around the margins with technology. If you don't have the tools you need and you get the tool, you are going to see a boost in productivity. But really, it's about understanding how the brain works. And I kind of happened on it by accident because I used to be a financial planner. I was in finance for like 20 years and I was a financial planner for about a decade. And I kind of got into behavioral finance, which it always cracks me up because I like to say I got my MBA at the turn of the century. Uh, and back then, they didn't talk about behavioral finance at all. Like all of my business school classes were all based on the rational man theory that people made economic decisions rationally. And bear in mind, so this is around the turn of the century. This is exactly at the same time that we were having the whole dot-com boom and bust.
Mm.
So there were articles in Wall Street Journal every day about, people making irrational decisions. And
Mhm.
then I'd go to business school at night because I did it at night. And I go to business school and they'd be like, well, people make decisions rationally. And I'm like, yeah, clearly not. I mean, clearly not. And so I got into that a little bit as a financial planner and I started learning about the brain and how the brain likes to work. Some of it's biology, some of it's kind of, we developed as a species on the savannah and there were certain conditions that, drove our brains to be a certain way. Um, and, those conditions on the savannah are obviously not what anybody deals with anymore in the modern workplace.
Mhm.
But as I was learning all this, as I was doing the research, I discovered why I personally had always been super productive. And I was like, oh, and then when the pandemic happened, I said, oh, well, now I can help other people because I'm in the midst of creating my book about productivity. And so one of the things I say in my book is if there was an evil alien genius that wanted to make workplace culture, like office culture, as hard as possible for humans, they would have designed something that looks very much like what we have now.
Yeah. I really like that. Oh gosh. It can really like some of the systems that we have in place, it's just like it doesn't make sense. That's the things that we do. So yeah, sometimes it can be like, oh, somebody else had to coordinate this because it doesn't make sense why we do
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yeah. And some things maybe did make sense. So I always go back to email because, obviously I'm Gen X. And so I have worked in offices before we had email because we didn't always have it.
Hmm.
Um, and when email was really first introduced, when we first had it in business, you might get a handful a day, maybe. And if you got an email because, there was no back then there was no spam because people hadn't really, they hadn't locked onto it, right? So you get a handful a day, and most of the time the email would be relevant or important to you in some way.
Hmm.
So back then, I'm talking like the 1990s, like literally last century, it might have made sense to respond to emails right away.
Hmm.
But, who lives in that environment anymore? Like, I don't know anybody who only gets a handful of emails a day. Like, who gets that? Like, nobody, right? And a lot of the stuff you get is spam, or it's something that maybe you want to file aside for later, or it's a newsletter that you signed up for, or something where it's really not important for you to read it right away. Like, there are other things that are far more important for people to do than even read the email, much less respond to it. And so
Hmm.
that's something that, like, you can see, like, where that kind of idea of, oh, we have to react to it right away came from. But it doesn't work in modern America. Like, that's not, you could end up spending your entire day. And I know people do, like, they end up spending their entire day on email because they get an email and, "Oh, I have to work on this," and then the next email comes in and the next one, and then they get to the end of the day, like, I had actual tasks that I needed to do that I didn't get to because I spent all day on email.
Yeah, and those are sometimes the days that we come out of the like the work day where we're like, I feel like I got nothing done today. But then you did get a lot of stuff, but it just wasn't the right thing that you had to get done that day.
Exactly.
Yeah, so how do we stop ourselves from that evil loop of like wanting to always respond to every single email as it comes in?
Well, one of the first things to do, and I also just kind of want to pause here because a lot of times what I get when I talk about this stuff, because I talk about focus and I talk about turning off notifications and all these things, and people are like, well, what about you know, what if you're neurodivergent? And I myself am neurodivergent, which
Mhm.
I guess people can't always tell from talking to me. Um, and I say that because some of the things that I have done in order to do what I need to do are as a result of being neurodivergent.
Mhm.
So, like, one of the things is, particularly for those of us that are on the autism spectrum, like, if we're in deep work and we get interrupted, it is a major dysregulation.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's severe. It's not like I think neurotypical people can kind of, they take the interruption. Yes, it will take them some time to get back to where they were, but it's not so dysregulating. It's not I can feel if I get interrupted when I'm in deep work and I get interrupted, like my heart starts pounding.
Oh, yeah.
And I might start shaking. Like, it's severe. And so
Yeah.
it takes a long time to get back to where you were after you have to, like, because you have to regulate yourself,
Mhm.
and that takes the time that it takes. And that's not, I mean, I can't do it in 30 seconds. I don't know, maybe some people can, I can't. So, so some of the things that I have discovered are ways that, like, I created because if I want to do focused work, and I do, and a lot of us, like people with ADHD and people on the spectrum, both can hyper focus. And so, being able to hyper focus, obviously you get a lot of work done, but you have to, kind of fence that in. You have to put your boundaries around so that you don't get interrupted. So one of the ones, and people hate when I say this, is I always tell them to turn off notifications.
Yeah.
Um, at a minimum. And some people are like, they really don't want to do it. And so I say, okay, when you're doing your focus work, when you're doing your deep work, at least if you can't do it all day, at least during your hour or two, or if you can get to 4 for deep work, at least during that time, just turn your notifications off. Put your phone away because if the phone is near you, it'll keep kind of reminding you. So even if you have notifications turned off, you're going to have that desire to like pick it up and see what's going on. You want to get that variable reward dopamine hit,
Hmm.
which is built into a lot of the things that you use your phone for. So just put it away, like don't see it. Because if you don't see it and you get into deep work, then you're going to be able to focus and then you're not going to have so much of a problem. So, no, I mean, I haven't, even when I worked in corporate America, I turned my notifications off. I haven't had notifications on for 20 years. I turn off the sounds. I also turn off the pop up in the middle of the screen because the pop ups are also distractions. Um, and so that's really like, because it's hard like, if you're if you keep having notifications, you're, like, trying to work through the
Hmm.
notifications, and that's really hard for the brain to do, like, it is hard. So just turning off the notifications, just give yourself a break, you know what I mean? Turn them off, like
And I honestly have to thank you because, like for listeners that don't know, I actually met JJ at at a workshop that she hosted, for the chamber, and she gave very, very good tips, kind of like the ones that she's giving right now. And I started doing scheduling like my emails when I'm gonna check my emails, when I'm not, and turning off my like putting that do not disturb, so I don't get any notifications. At first, I'm not gonna lie, as a neurodivergent, I was getting so much anxiety not being in the know, and I
Yep.
was, what if someone's dying? What if someone's like, need me? And I was like, well, they can wait, But the problem was not I forgot that everything was on do not disturb. So
Oh.
at the end of the day, I'm like, today was such a calm day. I got so much stuff done. And then I was like, wait, why do I have that little moon on? And I turned it on and everything came at me at once. And I was like, okay, let's take it.
Yeah, that could be tough.
Yeah, so now it's just like now it's just finding that balance. But no, it definitely did help because I got so much stuff done that I had been procrastinating. Not more
Mm,
so because I wanted to, but because things kept popping up that
yeah,
were quote unquote urgent that wasn't really urgent.
yeah, definitely. And that's the other thing too, like, with emails is a lot of times and I think you can do this on text as well. A lot of times people just want to know that they're on your radar. Like
Mhm,
they just want to know, okay, she got my email. It's not like sitting in her pile somewhere or whatever. So just having a simple autoresponder that goes out automatically that says, "Hey, got your email." I don't check emails, because sometimes people will like schedule, like they will check emails once or twice a day at specific times. And that's a good way to do it as well. And then you can just say in your autoresponder, here's when I read and respond to emails. So
mhm,
people are like, okay, on the radar, they got the email. It's not like sitting somewhere in limbo, it didn't go to the spam folder because your autoresponder won't go to the spam. Um, okay, I, as the sender of the email, can move on with my day. And I
mhm.
know that they'll get to it. And most of the time, that's really what people want.
No, and I completely agree with that just because I sometimes, let's say I get an email and I was like, I'll get to it later. And then like an hour later, hey, just following up, did you receive my email? Like it was pretty pressing. Which
Right.
that can easily just fix it. Okay, they're gonna respond by this time, I'll wait until then.
Yeah,
Yeah, so a lot of it is just communication and giving them that those little tools that will help you communicate things even when you can't. So that's
exactly.
no, that's great. So listeners, make sure you write this down, you highlight it, you input it to your life. It does work, and JJ knows exactly what she's talking about.
Now, I will say that, as sometimes, especially if you have been like responding to every email as it comes in and you decide, okay, I want to try this batching thing. I want to do a bunch of emails at once. Like you will need to communicate that. Like if people are used to getting automatic responses from you and all of a sudden they don't get them. So, so one thing that I found effective is to, again, in marketing, we talk about radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me. So you think about like what's in it for the person who's going to be,
Mhm,
seeing this. And so, I might say something like, I'm batching my emails because I'm really trying to work on client work. the important stuff, my client work at other times. And that's why I'm moving, and when you say it like that, people are like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm fine. Especially like if I'm a client, like I want you to work on my stuff.
Yeah.
I'd really rather you work on my stuff than on emails. So,
Yeah.
when you put it that way, people are like, okay, got it.
No, that makes sense. And it's all about communication at the end of the day and communicating that. So, one of the things I want to go into, increasing productivity can go in hand with like decreasing stress levels as well, because a
Mhm.
lot of the same techniques can be used to tackle that. So, can you talk about some things that you might have implemented with prior clients or current clients that not only increase productivity, but also help regulate that stress?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's absolutely true. And that's why I say like when I help you with productivity, it's not intended to cram more things into the day because some of the stress is just because we're completely overloaded with information. And if you're not creating those boundaries and those ways to kind of block the fire hose of information that's coming at you, like that's just stressful in and of itself. And it's important, I think, as well to distinguish between like information and knowledge.
Mm,
Um, because there is a lot of info, but not all of it is going to help you. Some of it might help other people, but it might not help you. And really, making sure, productivity to me is really it's not a goal in and of itself, right? Like I am not productive because I want to be productive. Like that's not my end goal. My end
mm,
goal is I want to free up more time to do other things because I have, I love my work and as I warned everybody at that workshop, I was like, I can talk about this all day.
love that.
you know, I have a passion for helping people reclaim more time for the life side of that work life balance. So I have a passion for it, but I still have other things that are completely unrelated to this stuff that I want to do, and I want to do them on a regular basis. So for me, productivity really is about, freeing up time to do other things. For some people, productivity might be I want to, kind of figure out some ways to get things done so that I can grow my business. Like
Hmm.
maybe I want to scale up and my team needs to be more productive in order for us to, be able to scale up and do some more things. So there are different reasons why you want to be productive, but, productivity in and of itself isn't, that's not the goal.
Hmm.
It's what's the bigger thing that you want to do. And so certainly one of them can also be, I want to get more done and decrease stress.
Exactly. And
Y-
I think, for people to really understand the kind of like what you do, in your own words, can you define what productivity means to you?
Yeah. So it's really about getting the important tasks done in a reasonable amount of time so that you do have more time for that again for the kind of the life side of the work life balance. And I say the important tasks because sometimes especially business owners will just be like, you know what, there's 17 things on my desk and I'm just going to cram through them all, but not all of those 17 things should be done
Mhm.
by the business owner. you know there are, sometimes things, we feel important when we have like a long task list, or we feel important when we're quote unquote busy, or we feel important um because there's a ton of stuff and it's just going to be faster if I do it. And also, but having those, huge to-do lists is a stressor. It
Yeah.
makes us feel more stressed. Being, I tell people, actually I put this in the book. I'm like, when you talk about priorities, you can't have 10 priorities.
Mm.
Like that's just a list of things to do,
Yeah.
right? So when you think about the Olympics, right? There's a gold medal and there's a silver medal and there's a bronze medal. And you can't have, you know, um two different countries with gold. You know? So when you think about your priorities, you can have a gold medal, and that's the one that has to be done. That's the most important thing. And
Mhm.
then the silver and the bronze. And then, if you have some extra time, maybe you pull in another task that you're working on, whatever. But, you have these and the other benefit to having a short task list is to um um, you can actually accomplish things.
Mhm.
like if you have a list of 20 things to do, you're not going to be able to do 20 things a day. That's completely and utterly unrealistic. So that feels stressful because you're like, oh my God, I didn't get everything done. Well, of course you didn't. You know, time is time.
Mhm.
Things take the time that they're going to take, and you can't do 20 things in a day. You might be able to complete 3 things in a day. So you got to make sure that those 3 things are the most important things that are priorities, your gold, silver, and bronze medals that are going to move, your business forward. Or if you are working for somebody else, that are going to move, your tasks forward, or they're going to move you forward in your career, like important stuff, other things can kind of, maybe we kind of, they go by the wayside, or they don't even, sometimes people have tasks and you're like, does this really even need to get done at all?
Mhm.
Like, is this even a thing? And it might not be, or it might be something that you could automate, or you could, delegate or outsource in some way, kind of, again, depending on, where you are in the hierarchy of things. Um, there, cause you know, really being overwhelmed is what happens when you have too much stuff to do
Yeah.
and too little time. So really kind of focusing on priorities. And then the other part of that too is, I think, and again, I apologize. I use this example in my book, but I said, if I had a to-do task that was write a book about productivity,
Mhm.
I would never do it.
Yeah.
Cause like, where, where do you even start? Like write a book. Okay. Like, how does that even happen? So, and there are tests like that, right? Where they're just so huge and people kind of like beat themselves up for procrastinating. But it's kind of like, well, of course you procrastinated because that task is way too huge
Yeah.
to do or to even think about doing. And so when you have those big ones, it's helpful to separate kind of like the planning from the execution. So you take aside a little time for the planning. You say, okay, here's my task, write a book.
Mhm.
What are the steps in this task? What has to happen first? Are there sequential things? Are there things that can kind of happen simultaneously? But, what is the first thing that has to happen? And then particularly for people that have an issue with procrastination, like what's the tiniest step I can take to start like the first step? So, people talk about when you need to get to the gym, when you need to work out, and they're like, you know what? Don't think about a 40-minute workout or an hour-long workout. Just, can you get on the treadmill for 10 minutes?
Mhm.
And people are like, okay, well, I could do that. I could do that for 10 minutes. I couldn't possibly get on a treadmill for half an hour, but I could do it for 10 minutes. And then what happens, right? You're on the treadmill at 10 minutes. You're like, I could keep going. I don't need to stop now. Like, this is cool. Like, I can keep going. And that's how you get your workout done. Um, but maybe the first step actually isn't even to go on the treadmill for 10 minutes. It's go to the gym.
Mhm.
Like, that's the first step. And then you get to the gym and you're like, okay, I'm at the gym. Well, you know what? I could get on an exercise machine now that I'm here. I could get on an exercise machine for 10 minutes. So really breaking things down into those small chunks. And then what's the smallest part of that step that I could do? And then once you get there, you're like, oh, okay, well, I could do a little more, you
Mhm.
know? And so for the book, when I was drafting it, the chapters were too long for me to say I could get a chapter done in a day. But you know what I can do? I can write for an hour a day. Like that's a manageable chunk. I can write for an hour. And when you put those, all these little steps, all these little chunks together, eventually, you have that task completed. I haven't finished the book yet, but I'm making steady progress on it because you spend a little time consistently, and the same with tasks that have a lot of steps. You do one task and you complete it and you're like, "Hey, you know what? I actually accomplished a big task that I needed to do today." And then the next day, you're on the next task. And eventually, you get to the end and it's completed.
Exactly. And I think there's 2 things I wanna add to that. We put so much pressure on ourselves because
Mhm.
our value is tied with how many things we get done that day.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter if you get one little thing done or, like, one big thing done, your value doesn't change. You still have a lot of value, you still matter, nobody's gonna think lesser of you,
Mhm.
no? So don't think lesser of yourself. We are
Right.
so hard of ourselves and we don't give ourselves grace because life happens to everyone. Sometimes we have other things, other stressors. You know, we may have children, we may have a spouse, we may have someone that we're taking care of, maybe our pet is ill. You never know what's going on. So
Mhm.
who am I to judge for you to get two things done versus your usual six, whatever it may be. And
Yeah.
then two is a lot of people think that they will get motivated to do the thing and then they'll do it. But a lot motivation doesn't come until you start doing the thing that you want to do.
That's true. That's yeah, and those are both really good points. Yeah, I mean, whether or not you're productive has no effect on your worth as a human being, right? You're worthy as a human being, and I'm super productive. There are days when I don't get anything done, and
Mhm.
that's just that's going to happen.
Yeah, I had a conversation literally yesterday with my best friend. She's a business owner's mom, full like basically manage the household, does
Hmm.
and everything, does a million things. And she's so used to working, 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 never resting. Yesterday I called her and I was like, "Hey, how's it going? What are you up to?" "I'm being lazy. I'm being unproductive." And I was like, "Wait a minute." I was like, let's talk this through. Before we even start with the rest of the conversation, you called yourself lazy. Why are you calling yourself lazy? I was like, because I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting here like taking a breath. And I was like, you're intentionally resting to let your body recover. Therefore, you can be more productive later. So this is intentional. Don't devalue yourself by calling yourself lazy because you're resting. We always find reasons to talk ourselves down and tell ourselves, I'm useless because I'm not doing anything right now. But we don't have to wait until we're sick or until our body forces us to rest. Make
Hmm.
sure you're doing those intentions too.
Yeah, and that's another good point of our brains are not computers, and most of us are knowledge workers, right? Like we
Mhm.
need to think for our work. Um, and the brain needs rest, and it actually does perform better when you give it enough rest. And so, yeah, so as you say, like taking a break is not being lazy. And also lazy doesn't make you a bad person. Like I feel like I got to throw that in there too. Like we
Yeah.
kind of equate lazy. It doesn't make you a bad person. Like if you're out there murdering people, that makes you a bad person.
Yeah.
Being lazy,
Mhm.
um, but also, yeah, it's there's that whole story about that Simon Sinek I think tells about these two lumberjacks, and they're having competition to see who can saw the most wood. So the first lumberjack's out there sawing away the whole time, like never stop, saw, 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 saw. And he periodically sees the other lumberjack like leaving, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I got this." Right. So at the end of the day, he looks at his wood pile and he's got a whole bunch of stuff, sawed away. And he's like, "Okay, I'm definitely going to win." And then he sees the other lumberjack's pile, which is much bigger. And he's like, "How did that even happen? Like, I saw you leaving." And the other lumberjack's like, "Yeah, when I left, I went to go sharpen my saw. And
Mhm.
that's why I have." So that's obviously a metaphor, and I think what a lot of people don't understand is that for the brain, when you take those breaks, when you are resting, when you're sitting there, not scrolling through social media, not reading emails, just sitting, maybe you're staring out the window, maybe you're getting a drink of water, maybe you're petting your cat, maybe you're throwing the ball with your dog, maybe you're hanging out with your kid. That rest is actually sharpening the saw
Mhm.
because your brain is the saw and your brain needs rest for peak performance. And not just at night. I mean, it does need rest at night also, 7 to 8 hours, but it needs rest during the day. Like I can always tell because I can go for about 45, 50 minutes in deep work. And then I can actually feel things all of a sudden they get hard. I start fat fingering the keyboard. Like I might read a sentence 5 times and like not have any idea what it says. And it's time for a brain break. It's
Mhm.
time to go rest.
Exactly. And then just listening to your body too. Because sometimes you just wake up and it's just one of those days you're like, today's
Mhm,
today I'm like at a 3. I don't think I'm gonna be as productive today. So let's try to like rearrange and be more realistic with my to-do list. And
mhm.
like what can I do that I have the mental capacity to do today? And maybe I do get some things done and then the rest is just intentionally resting and letting myself recover so that I can do better tomorrow.
Absolutely.
This has been phenomenal, and I can probably go in like another 5 hours just on this alone. but we do need to move on. So I do want to say, I want to ask, like, what is some practical advice that someone can take their business or their career to the next level, um, in the realms when it comes to productivity?
I think all animals, certainly all humans, we all have a circadian rhythm. And there are 3 to 4 types, depending on who you ask, of sleep chronotypes. So these are, when I was a kid, people would ask if I was a morning lark or if I was a night owl. And I'd always be like, well, I'm neither one. Like, why do you ask? And so there are a bunch of us, about half the population is in the middle. So the chronotype that I prefer, lions are the early morning people, so those would be the morning larks. And then people like me are bears. So 9 to
Hmm.
5 actually works pretty well for us. Wolves are like night owls. They tend to be more active at night or later in the afternoon. And then there's dolphins, and they don't sleep well. And then another way to say this is you can have morning larks, night owls, and then those of us in the middle are third birds. And so it is not like super important. Well, the reason that it is important is so that you will know when is the best time for you to do your focus deep work, because we only get about 4 hours, again, due to biology and some things about, how we developed as a species. We only get about 4 hours for this deep work, for really focused work, because it uses a part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is where our executive function sits. That's where we make decisions and we do planning and strategizing, blah, blah, blah. We get about 4 good hours out of that thing a day, is the upshot.
Yeah.
And your chronotype will tell you, like, or if you don't even know your chronotype, but you've been in work for a while, you will know, like, what is a good time for you to be doing this, like, really hard brain stuff. So again, strategizing, planning, that kind of thing. Like, if you're an accountant, it's, the time that you're going to be doing tax returns. It might be working on spreadsheets. If you're a lawyer, it's like, legal briefs or doing some legal research, like these things that are very hard for the brain. So it's not emails, it's not administrative tasks, it's not um meetings. It's not necessarily talking to other people, because that's something that we do very well, just as humans, like that's a thing that we develop. So the hard stuff. So you get a huge bang for your buck when you match the time that your brain is best able to do the hard stuff with the hard stuff. And also, and the other really important thing about this, and this is, I think, what people struggle with. Like, I think people often, especially if you've been in business for a while, like, what that time is, when you're ready to do it. But keeping that time solely for this hard brain stuff, which means no interruptions, no email notifications, no social media notifications. Like, you'll need to take a break every once in a while, but again, staying away from. So I don't have a problem with social media, but I do have a problem with news feeds. Like, I read about 7 news newspapers a day, like online. So I have to make sure that I'm not doing that, because that's not giving my brain enough of a break. So that's like where you're really, and that's where you're really going to get a sustainable boost. So if you're a business owner, for example, and you might say, okay, so I'm a bear, so like 9 to 1, or a third bird, however you want to say it, 9 to 1 is my really good focus time. So I need to make sure that, I'm not having any meetings, so I can't open my calendar for anything before noon.
Yeah.
So no meetings, no nothing. Also, probably not going to check email before I get to work.
Yeah.
And that's certainly the case for the early birds. So when you, and I think this is very important, and this drives me crazy. Like, and I talk to people about this all the time. Like, some of the productivity gurus will tell you to get up at dark 30 in the morning and get right to work.
Hmm.
And if you are an early bird or a morning lark, that will work. If you're a lion sleep chronotype, will work. If you're not, and most of us are not, it is not going to work. Not even a little bit, not at all, because bears and wolves tend to we need to get into the day a little bit. Like, we
Hmm.
don't, we don't work super great. Because I actually tried this out. I tried this out. I tried to, like, wake up and get stuff done, and I was editing my book at the time, doing self edits. And so I found that, and I did it for a week, and I could get about 4 pages edited in the morning if I like got to work right away. When I went back to my natural way of working, my bear way of working, I got like 8 pages done a day
Hmm.
or in an hour. So it was like a significant, like I got twice as much done by not getting up and doing the thing because it doesn't work for other sleep chronotypes. So if you know that, you work better later in the morning or in the afternoon, um, don't worry about getting up at, 4 a.m., 5 a.m. That's not going to work for you. So just, skip that advice. Just ignore it. On the other hand, if you know that like you wake up and you're like ready to go and like that is a time that you should be tackling tax returns, go for it. It works really well for you. Do it. If it doesn't work, don't feel bad about it. Don't feel guilty. It's not because you're lazy. Because I know there are some early birds that like they feel very virtuous about getting up early in the morning, but that's just because it works with their natural sleep chronotypes. You're not lazy. You're not bad if you can't get to work when you wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning, because for most of us, that actually doesn't work.
Yeah, and I agree with that 1,000%. I actually added a disclaimer on my email. And I put, and I'm going to read it verbatim. I understand that our working hours may differ, so please don't feel pressured to respond right away. I look forward to hearing from you when it's your convenience. And the reason
I love that.
I started putting that on the end of my emails is because I realized that my most productive hours is 6 to 9 p.m. I'm just a
Mhm.
night.
Gotcha.
I'm like that's my brain's active, all the activities happening. I feel like I'm a cat sometimes because I get the zoomies during that time. So
Right.
so that's when like I'm like super productive and I'm just like ready to tackle whatever I need to do. And it's those 3 hours that I'm just really hyper. So that's when I go through all my emails. I work any big projects, anything that needs like hyper focus. But some of my clients were like, shoot, he's responding at 9 a.m. Let me respond back.
Right.
No, no, that was not the intention. And I'm like, because I'm sending follow-up emails. Hey, at your convenience, just let me know how you're progressing. And they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, blah, blah. And I'm like getting emails at 12, like in the morning. I was like, that no, 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 no. That's not what I want. It's like, by no means am I that insane person that wants you to respond right away. So ever since
Right.
people are like, oh, okay, cool. He's just like working later. But because of that, I don't set up any like 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 10 a.m. meetings. My day starts
Right.
because I already know after work, I still need some time to unwind.
Yep.
So my day just starts later. So it's not going to be the same hours as the 8 to 5 as most people.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. And another thing, and one thing I actually recommend for people, entrepreneurs who have staff, because sometimes they'll say, okay, well, they'll tell their staff, okay, you don't have to answer the emails after hours, but the staff still feels they're like, well, my boss sent it, so shouldn't I? So for them, I recommend scheduling the emails. And sometimes I use my CRM to do that because I mean, you can do it in Google, but I have Google Gmail. Um, but it's a lot easier in my CRM, and I can just say, yeah, send it tomorrow, 8 a.m., like whatever the business hour is, and then and that's when it goes out. But I do love that you say that, like, don't, you know, no pressure to respond to this right away because I work different hours. I love that.
Yeah. And I love that scheduling feature, but sometimes my mouse hits the wrong button. And then I'm like, shoot, I just sent that. But I was like, the disclaimer's there. Okay, cool.
Right.
Yeah. Especially when I'm trying to send mass emails.
Oh,
But
yeah. Yeah.
this has been great. We're at the point where I'm gonna ask you the last question. It always makes people ponder, but it's the unicorn question. What has been the unicorn lesson that changed your life for the better? Maybe a piece of advice that someone told you when you were younger, or something you learned the hard way that you're like, wow, this really pivoted my life and my career.
All right. So this isn't actually anything about productivity.
Okay.
Um, but I was having a period where I was very depressed mentally. And this is when I was 35. I went to the doctor, and for some reason they asked me like how much I drank, and I was honest about it. And they said, you're actually going to have to stop drinking before we can address the depression. And so I got sober. And that was a huge was because it's not just and any of your listeners who've been on a similar journey, whether it's booze or drugs or anything else, workaholism. um, it's not just about the substance, right? It's about like all the other stuff that kind of goes with it. And so that was a really big change. I had to really take a good honest look at myself, which I had not been able to do for a long time. and really think about, what are things that I would like to work on.
Mhm.
And obviously that onion is never ending.
Yeah.
I'm constantly peeling it back. But it's nice now because that was some time ago. And now there are all kinds of, non-alcoholic options, and you can go to the bar and get a mocktail so you can hang out with your friends who drink. But, really just kind of getting honest about and I didn't realize like how much it affected me because I never, I didn't drink at work. I wasn't drinking in the morning. I think I would have gotten there eventually, but at the time that I quit, I wasn't. But it really, the amount I was drinking really affected me.
And thank you for being so vulnerable. And I think that's something that we don't really take into consideration is like, what are some habits that we do outside to kind of like handle our stress that
Mhm.
not be serving us in the best way possible?
That's so true.
Like, for me, I suffered from, it's called procrastination sleep, where I felt that and it's very common in people with, like, who are neurodivergent, where they would go through their day and you don't feel like you had time to unwind, so then you
Mhm.
purposely stay up late to rest and unwind, but
Oh, gotcha, uh-huh.
then you're over here at 3, 4 in the morning, and you still have to get up at 6.
Right.
And then you keep doing this to yourself, and then and it gets worse and worse because you still feel more tired, so you're like less productive. And that's when, like for me, the longer I was awake, the more I would consume
Right. And
because
that makes it harder to go to sleep.
yes, and then like I would be like eating all this junk food. I was gaining so much weight. It got so bad, and I didn't realize it was a problem until my doctor said you're pre-diabetic. And I was like, "Shoot." And he's like, "You're pre-diabetic, you have a fatty liver, and, if this continues, like, you're gonna have diabetes, and we're gonna have to replace that liver." And I was like, "Yeah, I need to change my."
Wake up call.
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
became bad because I was started getting addicted to food because that was my thing that I started, like, treating my stress with.
Mhm.
So, it was a whole different change. I had to change my whole lifestyle and everything, and you have to do that deep thought, "Is this really serving me? Like, what
Yeah.
I'm doing? And is there an ulterior way that can make me still tackle the day, but without having these negative things holding me back?"
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for having that deep conversation, and I think it's something that the listener will definitely hopefully take from them and start pondering, like, what are some things that maybe I can peel the onion back and do a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for being
Thanks
on.
for having me. So, yeah, this was great. Thank you.
Of course, and if anybody wants to hire you, learn more about you, attend a workshop, or just get to follow your journey, how can they do so?
Probably the best way is my website, and it's www.jenniferjank.com, and I will spell that. It's JenniferJank.com.
Perfect. And if, somebody wants asking for a friend, me, uh, we wanna keep them tabs when your book, releases. Can we sign up for, like, a newsletter on there or something where we can kind of, like, find out?
Yeah, I would say actually connect with me on LinkedIn. And I am Jennifer JJ Jank. Again, that's JANK on LinkedIn. Because I don't have my launch page up yet, but I will be posting some updates. So when I get that launch page ready, I will definitely be posting about it on LinkedIn. I only use LinkedIn. That's the only social media I use for my business. So
Awesome.
that's the best way. Thanks
So
for
for
asking.
Of course, of course. So for listeners, I'll be adding all of this information in the show notes as well. If you go to my website at rainbowcareercoaching.com, you'll see a tab that says Unicorn Wall of Fame. You'll see Jennifer, JJ and Jennifer on there. And it'll have a little blog on description of everything that was talked about today and all the links that she mentioned as well. And friendly reminder for everybody, episodes come out every Friday at 7 a.m. And don't forget to apply the unicorn lesson that you learned this week into your life. Thanks once again, JJ. I appreciate it. And until next time.
Thank you.